Hey everybody, picking up in our study of the 7 I am statements that Jesus made in the New Testament in the book of John. And the one that we're going to be looking at today it's John chapter 10 verse 14. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. You know, the thought that really came to my heart and mind when I read this I am statement that Jesus made was really to not worry about having to protect ourselves or not having to worry about protecting myself. The situation many of us find ourselves in, hopefully we're coming out of here soon. We see glimmers of hope with summer instantly here pretty much, and people going out more and more, and us phasing back into our pre-COVID times. But there's still a lot of fear in the world today. Fear over future, uncertainty, fear over our finances, fear over COVID, fear over getting COVID-19. We just find ourselves surrounded by fear like we never have been before, and it's on a global scale. I mean, the collective fear gauge of the world has to be in the red zone, way in the red zone, and it may be that way for some time. So as I was reading this verse here, I am the good shepherd, and the last part, I lay my life down for the sheep. I'll share with you a personal story pre-COVID for me. Genevieve and I were celebrating our 16-year wedding anniversary, and it was right before COVID. It was in February, late February. We got married on Valentine's Day, and I had maybe 3 days in to our time away together, just this strong sense, feeling, emotion, spiritual attack, you might want to call it, of fear and anxiety. And I really wasn't sure why. I was really taken aback by it, surprised by it. And I told Jen, I said, honey, pray for me. I don't know where this is coming from. But in particular, my fear had to do with the fear of death. You know, and I don't know what that was. I was thinking maybe, Lord, this is my year to go. And why am I afraid of that? And it stemmed from, I was reading this book. I was reading a book about a military guy who he was on his deathbed, and a whole bunch of bad things happened, and he almost died. He lost his spouse. This is a very depressing book. I would not recommend it. I'm not even going to give you the title. But it sort of put me in a little bit of a funk where I kept being worried about dying, and I was afraid of it. And this is pre-COVID, right? So I had this just immense fear. It was maybe 4 or 5 days of it straight. And here we are, we're celebrating our Sweet 16 wedding anniversary. And at one point, we're at the Medieval Times thing in the Orlando area, and it was a ton of fun. And I remember looking around, and all I kept thinking, was, is this going to be my last date with Genevieve? And I was afraid, and I kept having this fear. And eventually, through a lot of prayer, by the way, when you feel like it might be a spiritual attack, good idea to pray and have those around you start praying. It went away. And I feel like what the Lord was giving me was a little bit of a taste of some of the fears that are very real right now all around us, and how crippling that can be. And I really encouraged myself in the Lord with this thought that no matter what happens, He's got you. No matter what transpires in our lives, He's got you. And it really brought me back to a place in my life. I used to not like flying on airplanes. And I remember I was very concerned about getting on an airplane for many years. I had a brother-in-law who lost his life in a plane crash. And so I kept going back when I was afraid of flying, because I really needed to fly for my job. I started researching, hey, if the plane, worst case scenario happens, if the plane goes down, what's the worst that could happen? And I started doing some research, and here's what I found out. I found out there's been several people who've actually fallen out of a plane, some at 35,000 feet, And they've survived. And I started poring over the data. In 1971, there was a plane that flew from Lima, Peru. It was struck by lightning. It broke apart, and everyone on board was killed except one lady named Julianne. She fell like 35,000 feet, and she walked away and had no issues and went on with her life. There was a 22-year-old flight attendant in 1972. Maybe the 70s were a bad year for people falling out of planes and plane crashes in general, but someone else who survived. And I kept reading, whoa, and what the Lord brought me back to was really the essence of this verse that we looked at. I am the good shepherd, and I lay my life down for the sheep. And I came to the conclusion, as I was worrying pre-COVID, over fear of dying, that when it's your time, it's your time. And what we need to know is that the good shepherd is always protecting us. And he's always protecting us until our homecoming. That's right. You and I have a homecoming party someday. A big celebration in heaven. Our story does not end here. It carries on into eternity. And while we're here, we can take comfort today in knowing that the I am, the good shepherd, lays down his life for his sheep. And he's protecting you. And he's protecting me. The Bible says in Psalm 112, verse 7, speaking of the righteous, speaking of believers, speaking of Christ followers, they will have no fear of bad news. They will have no fear of bad news. Is that you today? Does that describe you? If it doesn't, I hope you're encouraged by Jesus' words here in John chapter 10, verse 14. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. What intimacy! And I lay my life down for the sheep. So wherever you may be today, if you're fearing some bad news, take courage today, knowing that the Good Shepherd, the I Am, has got your back. He's got your back here, and he's got your back all the way through eternity. Love you all. Have a great week. What is God saying to you?